Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So, to understand this week's Torah portion, we have to go all the way back to the beginning of the Bible, the first Parsha, Bereshit. This week, I think as I said when we were talking earlier, I think we experience something of a resolution to the conflict that we saw way back in Genesis 4:9, when God said to Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" And Cain said, "I don't know." And then he said, "Hashomer achi anochi," which usually gets translated as, "Am I my brother's keeper?" But it's actually not such a great translation, because it's more like, "Am I my brother's guardian? Am I responsible? Am I the person to be looking out for my sibling?" We know, of course, that the answer is yes, but it takes quite a while, many, many generations, for the information to actually sink in. And I would argue that even today, we are still confused. We're still learning this lesson. Hashomer achi anochi. We are responsible for one another. This question reemerges, and maybe its answer emerges, in the tension and the ultimate resolution between the two brothers in this week's Parsha, Joseph and Judah. As a people, we're called a few different things: Ivri, right? Hebrews, the one who crossed over, and of course Yisrael. But our name, Yehudim, the Jews, of course derives from Judah. Judah is the ancestor of King David, who's said to be the ancestor of the Messiah. So who is Judah? Judah is a sort of a model, I think, of an evolved person. A man who at first is blind to his own mistakes and unable to see clearly, to see things as they really are. Instead, he sees them as he wishes them to be, like so many of us. Judah becomes the first biblical character to make amends, to recognize his wrongdoing and take responsibility. Our namesake is the first person to do teshuvah. The word teshuvah, as lots of us know, but some of us don't know, is usually translated as repentance, but it means something more like return. When we do teshuvah, we're returning to who we are meant to be. We have observed Judah's character develop from the boy who hatched the plan to sell his brother Joseph essentially into slavery for 20 pieces of silver. Judah's evolution seems to hinge upon the episode that we read about 2 weeks ago in Vayeshev, Genesis 38, when the Joseph story is suddenly interrupted with a seemingly tangential tale about Judah and his daughter-in-law Tamar. To briefly recap, Tamar married Judah's eldest son, Er, and when Er dies without producing offspring, Tamar is married to the second oldest son, Onan. As per custom, Onan also dies suddenly, and Tamar is then promised to Judah's third son, Shelah. But Judah delays indefinitely, fearing that his last son will suffer the same fate as the other two. So Tamar takes matters into her own hands and disguises herself as a prostitute to seduce Judah and secure an heir through him. When Judah finds out that Tamar is pregnant, he initially condemns her to death. But when she produces the seal and cord that Judah has given her as proof of their encounter, Judah admits, "She, Tamar, is more righteous than I am." Judah recognizes that he did not follow through on his promise to do his part to take care of her, to do what was right. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks notes that when Judah admits that Tamar was right and he was wrong, this is the first time in the Torah that someone acknowledges their guilt. Judah, says Rabbi Sacks, is ish teshuvah, penitential man. The root of his name is lahodot, to thank, when his mother Leah names him, she means to say, this time I will thank the Lord. But it also can mean to admit or to acknowledge. Whereas Joseph is Hatzadik, although I guess Jack would argue otherwise, maybe we can talk about that another time, the righteous one, Judah is Ish Teshuvah, penitential man. The Talmud teaches in a place where penitents stand, even the perfectly righteous cannot stand. In other words, one who makes a mistake and then repents and makes meaningful changes is greater than one who is without fault. Judah recognizes that he's wrong. He gains humility. Ultimately, his ability to see and take responsibility for his actions leads him to the moment in the beginning of this week's Parsha, when he's able to speak directly and clearly and passionately. And this opens up the possibility for forgiveness and transparency on Joseph's part. In the beginning of our Parsha, Judah begins his long and impassioned appeal to Joseph, whom he still does not recognize as his brother. This guy really has a problem with recognizing things. He doesn't recognize Tamar, and he doesn't recognize Joseph. There's a lot he doesn't recognize, but he kind of gets it in the end. And he begins with these words, Bi Adoni, daber na avdecha, devar be'oznei Adoni. It's a really beautiful and evocative phrase. And Everett Fox translates it, and I'm going to use the Everett Fox translation because it's a little more literal than JPS. He says, please, my Lord, pray let your servant speak a word in the ears of my Lord. So George Bernard Shaw famously said that the biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. And everything hinges on Judah communicating effectively in this moment of his speech landing. And it's this speech, really, that is able to open the floodgates for Joseph. His words allow Joseph to reveal himself and ultimately to forgive his brothers for their abuse of him. For this reason, Rashi's translation of Judah's opening line, the precursor, I would say, to Fox's translation, is hyperliteral. Rashi reads it as, may my words penetrate your ears. So how is it that Judah's words succeed in penetrating? Perhaps it is because Judah's communication happens on multiple levels. Perhaps Judah is both asking Joseph to hear, and he's communicating a profound truth about being in relationship. To understand this second layer, which is a bit mystical, we have to go to the Sfat Emet. I know you don't love this Eric, but stick with me. So the Sfat Emet, who was a 19th century Polish Hasidic Rebbe, suggested an innovative reading of Judah's opening words, one that gives us a sense of how thoroughly Judah has internalized what it means to be a mensch, a person who's keenly aware of his humanity and of that of others. Bi Adoni. So remember back to the beginning of this phrase, which starts with Bi Adoni. The Sfat Emet reads this not only as please my Lord, which is the Peshat, the simple meaning of it, but he reads it as my Lord is within me. So think back to those of us who joined us for the beginning of the service for Psuke de Zimra, verses of song. The first prayer that we chanted this morning when we opened our service was Elohai Nishama Shenatata Bi. The soul you have placed within me is pure. Bi Adoni, God is within me. Judah recognizes a deep teaching that he is able to impart to Joseph. God is within me. If God is within me, then God is within you. In truth, says Sfat Emet, what Judah recognized in that moment is that it's all God. Judah sees God everywhere. And it changes how he relates to others, how he moves through the world. This knowledge of God of that which is both larger than us and also binds us all together. This knowledge is what allows him to reach this proper state of anava, of humility, of right-sizing himself. We contain a spark of the divine, but so does everyone else. We make mistakes, but so does everyone else. The link between the offspring of between Joseph, the offspring of Rachel, and Judah, the offspring of Leah, will continue throughout the Bible. As Jack noted earlier, they go on to form the northern kingdom, the house of Joseph, and the southern kingdom, the house of Judah. And there are even legends, and they harken back to the Haftarah that Shula chanted so beautifully, that say that the Messiah will be two people, one descended from Judah and one descended from Joseph. Judah has evolved from the youth who sold his brother into slavery to the man who takes responsibility for the mistakes he made with Tamar, to a kind of a mensch who is brave and speaks up, confronts his powerful and estranged brother Joseph. Whereas he fell short on his promise to Tamar, he makes good on his promise to his father. Reuven, Shimon, or Levi ought to lead. They are older. Yet it's Judah who takes the lead. Perhaps he does so because he recognizes the holy spark within himself, which allows him to see it in others and thus to see the world differently. What would it mean for us to look out at the world as Judah does, to see God everywhere? It might mean many things, but one thing is for sure. We would know how to respond to the question when it bubbles up inside us. Hashomer achi anochi? Am I my brother's keeper? Am I responsible? To quote the great Jewish poet Robert Zimmerman, I guess it must be up to me. Shabbat shalom.